So, welcome in everybody to what is the Draft Dudes Free for All live stream. Joe, do you want to hit
We're
the
gonna have to
people
kick him
over
out.
here?
We're going to have to kick him out.
Joe, I'm kicking you out. You're getting removed if you don't do it. You're here for one thing and
keep
one
the
thing
mask
only.
on. Say hi to the people.
Please so we don't have to wake you up. We're coming through the aisle now for our final safety and first mask test. Now more than ever, we appreciate.
All right, Chris, get him out of here.
Yep, he's out of here. He's done.
We,
He's done.
We
Welcome
got
in everybody.
We
We tried.
To do.
We
better
tried.
than this, guys? Being dudes here on the Draft Dudes podcast. It's Kyle Krabs with Chris Schubert. You obviously had a chance to see Mr. Joe Marino hopping on a plane. He's jet setting on a Friday afternoon. Thought he'd join us, but he's got bigger fish to fry. And therefore, Chris and I are going to walk through the Friday free-for-all with each and every one of you. Chris, I believe you would like to inform and remind our friends of our other friends over at BetOnline. Is that correct?
So you want me to tell our friends about our other
the
friends
listeners about our other friends over at
BetOnline. That's what you want me to do? That would require me to have the read up. So if you could just filibuster me for a second. Joe jumping into the middle. Well, Joe, listen, this was supposed to be the Kyle and Chris production here, Draft Dudes on a Friday, and Joe just hopped.
Is back, guys. I'm going to filibuster while Chris obligates what he told me he had taken care of before we even went live. Jacksonville Jaguars jumped out on top of the Cincinnati Bengals last night on Thursday Night Football, 14-0. They had the goal line stand. The Bengals did just before half to prevent Jacksonville from going up 21-0. Joe Burrow conducts a fourth quarter comeback. They end up winning this football game. Lots of great quarterback discussions, obviously in a battle of two former number one overall picks, the last two number one overall picks. And I'm looking forward to getting into that conversation with Chris, but not before Chris tells everybody about our friends over at BetOnline.
I found it. Don't worry. We have it here ready to go. BetOnline back and better than ever. All eyes on the gridiron as teams are back to start another football season. BetOnline, your number one spot for all the pro and college football action this season. A new updated site, interface, odds, props, contests. You hear Joe talk about the player props that he bets all the time here on the show. You can get involved. If you head over to BetOnline, you will get your 100% welcome bonus. That is using the code BELIEVE, BLEAV. BetOnline, the fastest and easiest way to bet on all your favorite sports. BetOnline, your online sports book experts. Sorry, Kyle, my email got very out of sorts here. It's normally right there at the top, and it just wasn't readily available. Joe completely violating the FAA regulations on the plane while they were doing.
They weren't off the ground. He was okay.
Did you not hear the lady over the intercom doing the safety demonstration? You're supposed to pay attention during that. How often you travel a lot? You don't pay attention to that ever.
Yeah. No, because I've flown a lot, so I could pretty much do the safety presentation myself. You know, you take the mask. If you're traveling with others, you put the mask on yourself before you put it on somebody else. Make sure that you are aware of your full surroundings on the plane because the closest exit may be behind you. Buckle, you insert the small end into the big end, and you strap it together. And if you need to release it, you pull the top of the clasp, but you want to make sure it's tight around your what do you want to know about safety regulations for wearing a seatbelt when the fasten seatbelt sign is on and not walking around the cabin?
And then in the case of an emergency, you got the lights on the floor. They will illuminate you towards an exit. You got all that stuff, all that good stuff.
Correct. And your seat cushion can be used as a flotation device. Yeah. Okay. So there we go. We got all the safety instructions out of the way. Welcome in, everybody. Stay nearby here on the Draft Dudes live free for all. Kyle, let's start with last night's game. I think is probably a good place to start with Friday free for all as we get people piling in here. And I'm going to send out a tweet that we are doing this show live. Cincinnati winning, not much of a surprise. I think when you look at this game from the perspective of coaching, and that was the big takeaway I had, that I don't necessarily fully believe in Zach Taylor long-term, but my big takeaway was that's the example of coaching, the adjustments in the second half that Zach Taylor and Cincinnati were able to make, and the lack of adjustments that Urban Meyer was able to make lead to a 24-7 second half, and you lose a football game. Yeah, and, Jacksonville, as I said there on the top, this was about 6 inches away from being a 21-0 game at halftime. And, you could sense right when Cincinnati came out and they went right down the field and scored. very early on in the second quarter. And then Jacksonville, I think it was a 3-and-out, was like, oh boy, like momentum's completely shot here, right? And Jacksonville, they did have a nice answer once it became 14-14, but this is the struggles of Urban Meyer and transitioning to the NFL and having a rookie quarterback. And obviously he was real beat up after the game that Trevor didn't have a turnover. I thought Trevor did play pretty well. But you start looking at this Jacksonville schedule and it's like, thank goodness you play Houston twice, but I don't know where we're going to find a lot of wins on this schedule for Jacksonville right now because they're not well coached unless the coaching staff grows throughout the course of this rookie season with Urban Meyer.
I looked at their schedule last night. This is a team that is absolutely staring 0-8 directly in the face. Have you seen what their next 4 games are?
I know they've got to go to London in 2 weeks.
They have the Seahawks on their schedule. They have Miami. They have, I believe, the 49ers are also on their schedule. Let me pull it up again, but I thought they were staring 0-8 in the face when I looked at it last night. Here are their next 4 games. The Titans, the Dolphins, the Seahawks, the Bills. Those are their next 4. I think they're staring 0-8 in the face.
Who's the fifth?
They play the Colts on November 14th. Maybe they can sneak one win there, but and then it's 49ers, Falcons, Rams, Titans, and then they get the Texans and Jets in back-to-back games. That's probably a nice little – you circle that spot on the calendar to maybe sneak a win or 2 in there.
I saw the stat that Trevor Lawrence has now lost as many games in the NFL as he lost in his high school and college career combined.
I also saw a statistic that this is the first 4-game losing streak of Urban Meyer's coaching career.
Ever, going back to Bowling Green and Utah and Florida and Ohio State. Yeah. Different animal up here in the pros.
He just seems so dejected post-game. And I understand he cares about winning so much and he's not used to losing at this rate. And listen, the NFL is a different animal. You're going to lose. You're going to lose a lot actually in the National Football League. And it just feels to me that he's not necessarily adjusted to that yet. And that's not to say he can't get it adjusted to it. It just doesn't feel like he's going to get adjusted to it, at least this season. Because, he looked distraught post-game.
And I don't know how you run this thing back, to be honest. I'd be surprised at this point. I would be surprised if Urban, because they've lost, 19 in a row now? Is that what it is? Because they won the first game last year.
Since tweeting not satisfied with 1-0, they have lost 19 straight games, yes.
And they're looking at the next month is very, very, very challenging for them.
Friend of the show, Sam, wants to know who wins more games, Jacksonville or the Jets. I think it's Jacksonville.
I want to know. I want to know what the high water mark is. How many wins do these two teams get combined this year? Sam, it's a good question.
If you told me the total for wins for these two teams combined was 4.5, I think I would take the under.
Chris. I remember when we did the playoffpredictors.com.
Correct.
And I got a lot of grief.
You did?
For having to work to find 3 wins for the Jets. What happened?
Correct. Have you seen the way that they've played over the first 3 games of the season? That's what happened. That is what has changed my tune. They can't score points. You got to score points if you want to win, Kyle, and they can't score points. Okay, that's Thursday Night Football. Do you have any other? Do you have a free for all topic that you would like to discuss here on the show today?
I would love to hear what else Sam would like to hear us talk about, or Jackson, or anybody else in the comments personally. But if I'm looking at the weekend ahead, there's obviously a number of big SEC matchups, and I don't want to do the money down before we do the money down. But I thought it was very interesting that you have 2 matchups involving 2 sets of very successful SEC programs right now in Ole Miss and Alabama, and then Arkansas and Georgia. And both Arkansas and Ole Miss are getting more than 2 touchdowns, which is surprising to me based on how those teams played each other last year and the way that each of those teams has started this year. I just thought that was really surprising. Anytime you see an undefeated SEC team that played that opposing team well last time they played, getting 15 or 17, 18 points, I was like, wow. I was really surprised to see both of those numbers that big.
So, and again, we don't want to do the money down before the money down tomorrow. I'm filling in for Joe on the show tomorrow. And I will tell you this, Kyle, I'm doing research. I haven't made my final picks yet, but one of the games that I have absolutely locked in my pick for is the Georgia-Arkansas game because, and I'm going to say this as a question out loud, is Arkansas the best team that Georgia will have faced up to this point in the season? Because I think the answer is yes. Like, I think Arkansas is a better team this season than Clemson. And so to tell me that team's getting, at least last time I looked, it was 18.5 points.
I think it's down to 17.5 as of
that's still a big number.
The last
that's
hour.
3 scores.
Yeah, it's a very big number.
And I look at an Arkansas team that has NFL talent. Like they have guys that are going to play on Sunday next season on both sides of the ball. And so it's just, I was flabbergasted at that number all week, and I still am sitting here doing the prep work for this weekend. Okay, so Ryan's got one for us here. Who is your non-quarterback MVP so far this season? Okay, so Ryan, bear with me here because I got to think about this. Let me just look at the teams. I got to look at logos. That's what helps me with these things.
You know how many pressures Max Crosby has through 3 games?
Yeah, and
it's like 25, 26, 27.
That's the big difference for that team, right? Is that they're getting after the quarterback and they're doing it at a high level.
Because they don't, they got this Bradley system where they play a lot of cover 3, they play a lot of zone, they keep it in front of them, and they're getting organic rush with Yannick Ngakoue and Max Crosby. And that's been, the big exciting point for them as a jumping off point. And they got 3 wins in their first 3 weeks against Baltimore, Pittsburgh, and Miami, which are 3, teams that came into this year with playoff aspirations. So if you're the Raiders and you go 3-0 in an AFC gauntlet with those 3 teams that are perceived to be potential contenders in competition for the wild card spots, like, good on you. But Crosby, definitely, having watched him last week, was kind of the first name that came to mind. I know obviously we didn't get into offensive players and guys creating a bunch of scores and whatnot, but Crosby was a name that popped for me.
So it's funny when you have this conversation and you say that you can't pick a quarterback, I immediately go to the running back position of guys that are absolutely leading their team and helping drive their offense. But like Derrick Henry's not having that kind of season yet. Neither is Dalvin Cook. I mean, Christian McCaffrey, before he got hurt, was a big driver for what was happening in Carolina. He was making Sam Darnold look like $1 million, and that offense was rolling. But he's hurt now, so I don't know how much I can put stock into that. Like no one. Max Crosby's a great call, Kyle, because I don't know if there's anybody else that's really like jumping off the page. Like the Rams are 3-0, but Aaron Donald's kind of doing what Aaron Donald does, right? Like it's not like anybody is going outside the bounds of what we expect from them on a weekly basis. All right, this one from Sam. Is Lashawn Mccoy a Hall of Famer? And how many starting caliber safeties do you think are in this draft class? Tell me you didn't listen to yesterday's draft dudes without telling me you didn't listen to yesterday's draft dudes, Sam.
Well, no, not necessarily. Well, first of all, we didn't discuss Lashawn Mccoy. So we did
discuss safeties, but sure.
So Lashawn McCoy obviously is in the headlines because he signed a 1-day contract with the Eagles to retire a Philadelphia Eagle. He's from Harrisburg. He played the first half of his career, 6 seasons in Philadelphia, rushed for almost 7,000 yards, and how many touchdowns? Was it 44 touchdowns during that time with Philadelphia? He finished his career 1,000 rushing yards and 73 touchdowns. Chris, I'm a big sucker for round numbers. Okay. Lashawn McCoy finished his career with 15,000 yards on the dot from scrimmage.
Wow,
I was expecting a little bit more.
Sorry. I have his pro. Sorry, no. I have his Pro Football Reference page open, and I'm like, where is that number? And then I had to go all the way to the end. Wow, that's impressive.
A very round number. Just called it a day right there. I would have retired on the spot once I hit that number. I'd be like, nope, I'm good. 15,000 on the dot, I'm good. And 89 touchdowns. So this kind of gets into the discussion of very good versus great versus Hall of Fame, right? And I kind of struggle with Lashawn to think that he has that kind of elite, high-level staying power. He's a great NFL running back, but I don't think I could make a case for Lashawn McCoy to be an NFL Hall of Fame player.
I tend to agree. And when it comes to, and I come at this from a baseball perspective. You know how much of a baseball fan I am. And the Baseball Hall of Fame
Unfortunately, yes.
is the snobbiest thing of all time, right? It's just this
Yes.
holier than thou every year debacle that is the Baseball Hall of Fame. But the guiding principle that I use is, can you tell the story of the sport from that era or the position that player played without that player? Take that player out of the equation. Can I continue to tell the story of the game itself and that position without that player? And we would move on, no problem. And so when you apply those two questions to Lashawn McCoy, I think in the era that he played, I think I can talk about the game, and I think I can talk about the position of running back in that time frame in which he was at his peak without necessarily mentioning Lashawn McCoy. Good football player, probably arguably a great football player. But when you talk about Hall of Fame, when you talk about the tier above good and great, man, like that's a bar. Like I think it's okay if we say that guys aren't in that tier. That tier should be above and beyond everything else. And we're not taking any shots at Lashawn McCoy. At least I know I'm not, and I'll speak for you here. It's just I don't think he gets into that tier. I just don't. And I know there's a lot of people who disagree. There are a lot of people who are like, no doubt Hall of Fame when he announced this. And I was like, okay, don't necessarily see it that way.
28 modern era running backs who have been inducted into the Pro Football Hall of Fame. He's ironically enough, interestingly enough, Pro Football Reference also has a metric that kind of measures career production, and they put it into a Hall of Fame monitor or metric. The average Pro Football Hall of Fame running back has an average score of 107 in this metric that Pro Football Reference has created. Lashawn McCoy has a metric score in this, whatever criteria they're using, of 82.8. So he has not hit that average threshold. He does have a better score than some Pro Football Hall of Fame players at the running back position, including Curtis Martin. So never say never. But I think, once he gets into that eligibility window, he's probably somebody who's going to have to wait for a significant amount of time, and you're going to have to hope for a dry spell for him to get pushed in, I think.
Yeah, and Sam brought up a good point. Like Adrian Peterson and LT, I think, are the names from this tier of running back, from this time period of running back that you're going to go to. And then he mentions Edgerrin James. Is he in that tier? Sam doesn't think so, but he's in the Hall of Fame. Listen, Hall of Fame is always an interesting conversation because I think you can always twist, and I don't mean this in a bad way, you can always twist numbers to make a case. You can always find a way to put together a compelling argument for a player. And I think you're going to have that with Lashawn McCoy. I think there are going to be people out there that are going to be able to put together a compelling argument that at least is going to make people like me stop and think and be like, okay, maybe I need to reconsider this. Do we want to tackle the second part of Sam's comment, the safety comment, because he added to it and said,
let's come back to it. Let's come back.
Okay. All right. So this one from Corey. You think Russ is gone after this year if the Hawks can't turn it around and be competitive? Not looking great with LA and Arizona, both at 3-0. I think Russ is gone no matter what they do this season.
Well, yeah, I do think it is something that should not be forgotten. Kind of the drama early this offseason about, him being interested in being traded reportedly, and he apparently had a list of where he wanted to go and so on and so forth. That apparently got very close to happening. And from my understanding, Chicago had put in a fairly competitive offer for Russell Wilson, and Seattle just decided, we're not ready to do this yet. So if they run it back this year and kind of the wheels fall off the bus, maybe Seattle does kind of ask themselves that hard question. Pete Carroll's one of the older coaches in football. How much time does have left? This looks like a team that could potentially be, from a coaching perspective, in transition. Maybe they want to get a fresh start. I don't know. But I know Russell Wilson's expressed interest in exploring a trade based on frustrations with what was happening there. This is kind of the new wave thing, right? Like we see this more and more and more. And it's hard to imagine that this is just never going to come up again. So if they do kind of hit a wall in Arizona, you're absolutely right. Arizona's 3-0, and they haven't necessarily played the most daunting schedule, but 3-0 is 3-0 and 3-0. And if they're competitive in the division, they're already set up right now to have a winning record by the end of the year because of how well they started the year, right? Mm-hmm. And then the Rams and San Francisco, who's going through a quarterback transition, but we like what they have from a coaching staff perspective. They obviously have a significant amount of talent. They've got some concerns in the secondary right now with health and in the offensive backfield, so we'll see. But yeah, I think there's a very realistic chance that this could be a swan song for Russell Wilson. I'm not going to say I'm guaranteeing it or I'm predicting it, but like, would it surprise me? No, it wouldn't.
I think the other thing too, Kyle, to talk about is both I think this applies more to Arizona and San Francisco than it does LA, but those teams have younger quarterbacks whose windows are going to start, right? For Kyler Murray and the Cardinals, They view this as the beginning of their window. For San Francisco, they're trying to reboot things with Trey Lance and create that window with Trey Lance. And you have Russ and a roster whose window is on the other side, right? Their window isn't being open. It is starting to slowly close. And so that's something that they also need to keep in mind. You got two teams on the rise in that division. And then you have, Seattle kind of in that middle spot. I will let you know, though, that we're going to learn a lot about how true this Cardinals 3-0 is. At the Rams, home against the 49ers, at Cleveland are their next three games. So listen, you're 3-0 to start the year. You beat the Titans, the Vikings, and the Jags. Not necessarily a who's who to get to 3-0. It's at least a little bit better than the Broncos 3-0. But we are going to learn a lot about this football team here over the next 3 weeks. So I'd love to reevaluate this after those 3 games. All right, listen, I don't like talking about injuries or putting injuries out into the universe, but Matt asked a hypothetical question that I will at least put up here on the show. He said that if Jamar Chase gets hurt, because I'm not going to say what he said, if Jamar Chase gets hurt, and every other rookie offensive player, for the most part, stays the course with their current production, is Rashawn Slater the offensive, I think he means rookie of the year, not player of the year, the offensive rookie of the year?
It's going to be so hard for an offensive lineman to win this award. It's going to be impossible, right? And you can make the absolutely plant your flag in the ground and say, listen, the most impressive rookie season on the offensive side of the ball is Rashawn Slater. The voters will never give this to an offensive line because they can't quantify it. And a lot of them, it's a surface level award. Stat productions is what's going to draw a lot of attention. I would be stunned if they ever gave this to an offensive lineman because, for as good as Justin Jefferson was last year and he didn't get in, Justin Herbert, like Tristan Wirfs at right tackle should have been in that conversation. And there was no mention of Tristan Wirfs from the actual voters. So I think it was just Jefferson and Herbert were the only two that even were in the conversation. So I think you can get to the end of the road here and say, hey, if let's say Jamar Chase just slows down, right? Matt, I'm not arguing with you. I agree with you because Matt's saying quantifiably he's been phenomenal with pressures and sacks allowed. The voters aren't going to look at that. They're not. They're going to look at yards, touchdowns, receptions, passing yards, rushing yards, surface level stuff. They're not going to get into minutia of an offensive lineman and his performance. So I just don't think, we would certainly make a case. And this podcast appreciates a good offensive lineman when we see one.
That's right.
But the voters responsible for dishing out those awards are never going to vote for an offensive lineman for that award, in my opinion.
And I will add to this because Sam brought up the fact that Wirfs got no love, but with Herbert and Justin Jefferson, there is no Justin Herbert or Justin Jefferson right now this season. There is nobody that is putting up the numbers that those guys put up. So if there was an opportunity, if there was a year that could happen, I think this is at least right now on trajectory to be a year. All right, this one from Marcus. And I'm only bringing this up because I will say that the player in question, both players in question, have come up here on our TDN daily meetings this week. And I won't go too behind the scenes, but we have our meetings every day where we talk about different players. And we're talking about certain players, and Trent McDuffie's name has come up this week. But Marcus says, you guys have had a lot of love for Trent McDuffie, but have you guys had the opportunity to take a look at Kyler Gordon? 2 picks in the win against Cal, and has always been solid, if not spectacular.
Yeah, I know Dre Harris did an evaluation for him as the Pac-12 scout over the course of the summer. He liked him. He was toolsy, wanted to see more from him. And this is a good example of one of those players who's kind of answering the bell, and there was a lot of opportunities, especially in the Pac-12 with how reduced that schedule was last year, to kind of see flashes of guys. But it's like, they played 4 or 5 games, most of those teams. So you didn't really have a lot of confidence in where they were in their individual developments. Well, Kyler Gordon's one of those prospects, the other corner, and I don't like calling him the other corner, and I'm using air quotes when I say that. He has played really well, and he and McDuffie have both showcased themselves well. McDuffie's not getting a lot of targets in the passing game. Kyler Gordon is getting a couple more looks at the ball, and he's taking advantage of those opportunities and making a splash with them. And that's all you can hope for a guy who has a really high-level athletic profile. He's a bigger corner, too, so he's going to check a lot of boxes for a lot of people. And if he plays this threshold throughout the course of the season, he's absolutely going to be a riser when we get to the winter.
Kyle, before we get to our last couple ones here, I'm wearing my shirt today, my UCF Golden Knights national champions in 2017 t-shirt here on the show. If you want a t-shirt,
they're not, but the swag is phenomenal.
The banner, I believe the banner is up in the bounce house, so I believe it's up. So
it's lame. That's fine.
Tell me I'm wrong.
Tell everybody where they can get these phenomenally soft and comfortable t-shirts from our friends at Homefield, please.
Homefieldapparel.com is where you can go to get these premium collegiate apparel. These t-shirts are so soft. I just find myself just wearing them all the time just because they're so comfy. And when I'm sitting here at my desk all day, they are just super relaxing and comfortable. They're constantly adding more schools. As of this moment, they officially have over 100+ schools worth of gear up on their site. Listen, let them know what schools that you want them to have. They just added West Virginia. Made me very happy a couple of weeks ago when they added that. You can go over to homefieldapparel.com. You'll get 15% off your first purchase with the code TDN during checkout. You can get some swag like this. I think you guys have seen me wear my Statue of Liberty Boise State shirt with a shout out to Glendale, Arizona out here where I live. Okay, so a couple more here before we have to wrap up here on a Friday. This one from Jackson. Who will be the more sought after QB this offseason, Russ or Rodgers?
This is so hard because in my opinion, Aaron's floor and ceiling is here, despite the fact that he's older, but you get a longer runway with Russ. So it's like, if I'm going to, do I trade? Like, what's the trade value of Aaron Rodgers right now? I have no idea what the trade value is for him when he's 30, going to be 38 next year, I think. Coming off an MVP season last year, Russell Wilson's going to have a tire trade command, right? It was like 3 ones plus notable defensive players last year was the last offseason, was the asking point. And they got that. They just didn't take it. So if Russ, heaven forbid, Russ opens his list up to more teams, that price is even going to go higher.
Right, and that list last year was weird. Like the Russ list was weird in terms of team. It was Vegas, Dallas, I think New Orleans was on the list. It was a very weird group of teams that he put on the list that was very much like, I probably don't want to. I don't want to be here, but I'm going to make it really difficult for you to trade me by picking 4 teams that you can't trade with. And Sam just asked me in the chat, as a Jets fan, what would you give up for Russell Wilson or Aaron Rodgers? And that's I don't want to come out here and say that I don't want to trade for either of those guys because I have Zach Wilson on my team. That's not what I'm trying to say when I say this. But the Jets trading for Russell Wilson or Aaron Rodgers does not fix all of their problems. So I would rather keep the draft capital, work with a young quarterback who I'm not giving up on yet, and build a complete roster. And then if by the time the complete roster is built, if I'm not sold on Zach Wilson, I will then go explore the quarterback market. Because I really don't think if the Jets traded for Aaron Rodgers today, that it really changes a whole lot with what they're doing. They might win a couple of more games, but that defense is still a question mark. They're not healthy at offensive line. They don't have enough weapons for a wide receiver. So it's tough. Like, would I be comfortable paying the asking price that both of these teams have asked for those players? Yes. I just don't think the Jets are in a position to do that right now. I don't think they would be wise to do so.
So let me ask ask you this, because this is an interesting kind of pivot off of this. Is there any NFL, at least with Russ, right? Because he's 31 or whatever. Is there any team in the NFL that does not have a top 5 or 6 or 8 quarterback who should not be interested in making an offer to the Seattle Seahawks for Russell Wilson? Because you got like 10 years. I mean, he said he wants to play till 40 something. And I understand that, durability is going to have something to do with that. Mm-hmm. But, and this was the conversation that existed with Deshaun Watson before his legal issues off the field became apparent. And he kind of, before that, kind of instilled some of his no trade clause dynamics to whittle that field and kind of eliminate that. So with Russ, obviously he's, as far as we know, and you never know, but as far as we know, Russ is one of the most upstanding model citizens in the NFL. He's 31. He's potential MVP caliber quarterback and a top 5 quarterback in the NFL. Like, if you don't have a top 8 quarterback, under what conditions should you not at least be interested in making an offer?
Can I throw a team? Well, this is a poor example because I don't think Seattle would ever trade to this team in the first place.
Okay.
But I don't know if San Francisco, I don't think they currently have a top 10
They just drafted one. They just drafted one top 3 and gave up 2 first-round picks plus the one that they used to draft. So I agree with you, but that doesn't count because they just drafted one.
Okay, fair. And my argument would going to be like that. I just like they have other, like, their defense is banged up. It's getting older. They have other things they need to do, and they just drafted a quarterback. So they apply to the don't have a top 10 quarterback, but I don't necessarily think they're in a position to do so.
But I'm also going to counter you with they called Green Bay the day of the draft.
Okay, but that was before they
invested. But it was after they traded 3 first-round picks to move up. They still were calling about Aaron Rodgers.
Can you blame them? I don't blame them.
No. No, I can't. But I'm just saying, it was like they made that big investment, and then it was like, oh, wait, Aaron's still out there? Like, maybe.
Okay, No, I don't want to do it. I don't want to say that team's name out loud because I think the chat would be all over me. So I'm just going to keep that one to myself.
Okay, we can talk about it off the air. We're going to wrap because we got a scouting meeting here in about 60 seconds that we got to dig into.
We're going to be late too.
New version of the TDM 100 board, which we're obviously very excited to bring to you guys at the start of October after the month of September and college prospects kind of planting their flags in the ground. So appreciate everybody who tuned in on kind of an impromptu Friday live version of the Friday free-for-all. We appreciate our friends over at Bet Online for their continued support, as well as our friends at Home Field for hooking us up for some very soft, sweet, sick swag for college football teams everywhere across the country. Have a great rest of your Friday. Enjoy the college football and NFL weekend ahead. And thanks for checking out the Draft Dudes podcast.